My name is Catherine Monroe, and a year ago I wired $20,000 to my parents for their 40th wedding anniversary party, a party from which I was ultimately banned. The memory no longer has the raw, bleeding edge of a fresh betrayal. It's settled into a hard, cold fact in my life's ledger, the entry that marks the exact moment I stopped trying to balance my emotional accounts on someone else's terms and started building my own portfolio of self-worth. For most of my 38 years, I have been an investment banker, not just by profession but by instinct. Here in the cut-and-thrust world of Chicago finance, I manage risk. I analyze assets, identify liabilities, and build strategies that are resilient, profitable, and brutally pragmatic. It's a job that requires a clear head and a deep understanding of what constitutes a sound investment. Ironic, then, that I spent so long sinking my own emotional capital into the deeply insolvent enterprise that was my family. 3 months before the party, my mother, Camilla, called. Her voice, usually clipped and formal, was coated in a syrupy warmth I didn't trust. "Kate, darling," she began, "your father and I want to do something truly memorable for our anniversary in September. At the house in Lenox. We were hoping you might help us with the financial architecture of it all." For a moment, I was intoxicated by a familiar, foolish surge of hope. My parents' home, a sprawling, perfectly preserved colonial in the Berkshires, was a place of both idyllic beauty and quiet torment for me. It was there I learned that in the Monroe household, affection was a currency doled out for conforming to expectations and summarily withdrawn for any sign of inconvenient independence. My high-powered career in Chicago, my life built on my own merit, these weren't sources of pride for them, but rather a curious, slightly vulgar anomaly. My mother's request felt like a merger offer, a chance to finally leverage my success for their approval. When she brought up the money, the need for a significant capital injection to make the event truly spectacular, I didn't hesitate. I saw it not as an expense, but as a strategic investment in reconciliation. I imagined a crisp autumn evening under the New England stars, the murmur of refined conversation, my parents finally looking at me with the kind of validation I had craved my entire life. I wired the $20,000 that afternoon. I spent the next weeks managing the project, not just booking vendors, but drafting a blueprint for a new, more solvent family dynamic. Then, 2 weeks before the party, an email arrived. It was from my mother. It was brief, corporate, and utterly devastating. "Regarding the anniversary, we've made some adjustments to the guest list to ensure a more comfortable atmosphere for everyone. We'll be sure to toast to you." My mind refused to compute. A mistake? An error in transmission? But the follow-up text from my father, cold and final, liquidated any hope. I, the chief financial officer and sole underwriter of this grand family affair, had been divested. Staring at my phone in the sharp afternoon light of my Chicago high-rise, surrounded by the trappings of a life I had so carefully constructed, something inside me didn't just break. It went into receivership. And from the wreckage of that lifelong bad investment, something new, steely, and non-negotiable began to form. My family had always treated me as a utility. They were about to learn that utilities can be shut off. I've always been the dependable one, the load-bearing asset in the often volatile portfolio of the Monroe family. As the oldest of 3, I learned my role was to be stable, profitable, and quietly performing. My father, Richard, a tenured but emotionally detached economics professor, was the chairman of the board in name only. He ceded all domestic and emotional governance to my mother, Camilla, a woman who wielded approval like a controlling share, granting it selectively and on a whim. Her love was the blue-chip stock I could never seem to afford. I forged my own path, earning scholarships to the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business and building a career on pure grit. My siblings' paths were less structured. My brother, Dan, 2 years my junior, was a filmmaker of sprawling ambitions and zero revenue, perpetually in pre-production on projects that required seed funding, usually from me. My younger sister, Sophie, was the family's crown jewel. Effortlessly charming and chronically fragile, she was currently navigating the dramatic aftermath of a brief, ill-advised marriage, and as always, the family rallied around her, their concern a soft, protective bailout. My first real lesson in being written off the balance sheet came when I was 13. I won the top prize at a National Youth Science Fair. My parents were supposed to be at the ceremony in Washington, D.C. An hour before we were meant to leave for the airport, Sophie had a minor meltdown over a lost piece of jewelry. My parents stayed home to console her. "You understand, Kate," my mother had said, a statement, not a question. "Sophie is very distressed." I went with my physics teacher and accepted my award alone. That pattern became the governing principle of my life. My achievements were noted with a distracted nod. My contributions were accepted as my obligation. Yet I persisted, believing that if I were successful enough, generous enough, profitable enough, the market would correct. When Dan needed to cover 3 months of rent after another film grant fell through, or when Sophie needed a down payment for a luxury condo post-divorce, my number was the one they called. I always picked up. The anniversary party saga began with that rare, direct appeal from Camilla. "Kate," she purred, "we want this to be a true family event. A chance to consolidate our assets, so to speak. And your executive touch would make it perfect." That flicker of hope, so stubborn and so irrational, ignited. Perhaps this time, my value would be recognized. I sent the $20,000, my mind filled with projections of a happy return. The first sign of a market downturn came a week later. I called to discuss my vendor shortlist, a modern classic theme that would complement the Lennox estate. My mother was evasive. "That all sounds fine, dear, but let's not get mired in the operational details yet," she said. When I mentioned locking in a caterer, she brushed it off. "I'm sure we'll manage. You just focus on the big picture." A more significant tremor came during a video call with my father. I was asking about his musical tastes when I heard my mother in the background, on the phone with Sophie. "Your ideas for the floral arrangements are just exquisite, darling," Camilla cooed. "You have such impeccable taste." Sophie, to my knowledge, had contributed nothing but a Pinterest board. A familiar unease settled in, but I suppressed it. "You're being overly sensitive," I told myself. "She asked for your help. This time is different." As the summer weeks passed, my role expanded far beyond the initial cash injection. When Camilla fretted that all the best caterers would be booked, I immediately called my friend Jenna, whose company, Union Square Provisions, was one of Chicago's most exclusive. I explained the situation, and Jenna generously agreed to fly her team out, even giving me a friends and family rate that made the $20,000 budget work harder. I spent hours with her designing a menu that was a narrative of my parents' life together, dishes inspired by their honeymoon in France, local Berkshire ingredients, even a deconstructed version of the humble pasta they ate on their first date. "Kate, this is a love letter on a plate," Jenna told me. "They are so lucky to have you." Her words were a balm. My involvement deepened. I sourced vintage furniture from Lakeshore Premier Events, chose Belgian linens in shades of charcoal and cream, and designed the lighting plan myself. I curated a playlist of my father's favorite classical music. I ordered cases of a specific burgundy my father adored. Every decision was a calculated investment, every dollar an offering at the altar of family unity. I took 2 days off work and flew to Massachusetts for a tasting with Jenna and to walk my mother through the logistics. During the visit, my father seemed genuinely impressed. He put a hand on my shoulder. "This is truly first class, Kate," he said, his voice thick. "Thank you." But Camilla was a master of polite disinterest. She tasted the exquisite canapés with a non-committal lovely, and when I showed her the detailed event timeline I'd created, she barely glanced at it. "Whatever you think is best, dear," she said, her tone implying not trust, but a profound lack of engagement. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with Sophie. Yes, we'll finalize all the little touches on our planning call tomorrow. A call I knew nothing about. When I asked about it over breakfast, my mother waved a dismissive hand. Oh, that's just for the locals to coordinate logistics. Trivialities. I chose to believe her. It was easier than confronting the cold dread in my gut. Before flying back to Chicago, I had coffee with Dan. Mom's really pulling out all the stops, he said, then shifted uncomfortably. Sophie's been a huge help to her, really taking the lead on the creative side. When I asked what, specifically, Sophie had done, he grew vague. Oh, vibe curation. Moral support. I returned to my life, a fragile hope warring with a creeping sense of risk. I poured myself into my work, finalizing party details at night. The spreadsheet I was keeping, tracking every cent, was a testament to my commitment. It will all be worth it, I told myself, when we're all together, celebrating a family I helped honor. 3 weeks before the party, the silent exclusion became overt. The family group chat would fall silent when I posted a logistics question. My inquiries were met with vague answers or ignored entirely. I started to see posts on a cousin's social media, Sophie and my mother at a high-end boutique, scouting for the perfect accessories. The caption read, "Getting every detail perfect for mom and dad's big day." I was never mentioned. Then came the direct slights. I learned from a mutual friend that Sophie had formed a welcoming committee with 2 of my aunts. When I called my mother to ask why I wasn't involved, her voice was sharp. "Catherine, you're in Chicago. This is for people who can actually be on the ground. We can't run every minor decision past you." "But Mom," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "I've already handled the vendors. I've hired the staff. What are they deciding?" "The finer points," she said curtly and changed the subject. The most painful discovery came from Jenna. She called me, her voice tight. "Kate, I'm in a weird position. Your mother called me directly. She asked me to add a whole new raw bar to the menu and send the revised invoice to her. She specifically said, 'Don't bother Catherine with this. Her job is so demanding.'" Jenna paused. "I told her the entire contract was with you and I couldn't make changes without your approval." She got very frosty. "Kate, what is going on?" A chill settled deep in my bones. I called my mother, my heart pounding. She was ready with a placating, saccharine excuse. "Darling, I was just trying to take something off your plate. You're so busy, you're always so stressed." I had never, not once, described my work as stressful. I was proud of my career. But in her narrative, my success was a burden, a convenient excuse to sideline me. My anxiety became a constant, low-grade hum. "You're overanalyzing," a part of me insisted. "They wouldn't do this. Not after you've given so much." My therapist, Dr. Evans, would later call this motivated reasoning, the desperate mental gymnastics we perform to avoid a painful truth. It was easier to believe I was paranoid than to accept that even after this grand gesture, I was still being pushed to the margins. They still didn't want me at the table. 2 weeks before the party, I called my mother to finalize my travel. I planned to arrive on Thursday to help with the final setup. The conversation that followed is seared into my memory, a perfect, cruel transcript of the moment my illusions were finally and brutally liquidated. "About that, Catherine," my mother began, her voice taking on the brisk, efficient tone she used for unpleasant business. "There's been a change of plans regarding your attendance." I gripped my phone, a wave of dizziness washing over me. "What do you mean, a change of plans?" A long, theatrical sigh. "The fact is, the social dynamics are very delicate. And frankly, your presence, it can be rather intense. People feel they have to be on. We just want a relaxed, intimate atmosphere." The words were so absurd I almost laughed. "Intense? Mom, I planned the entire event. I paid for it. What are you talking about?" "This is precisely what I mean," she snapped, her voice losing its gentle facade. "You always make it about your contribution." "Yes, the financial gift was very generous, and we are grateful. But this party is not about you. It's about family. Then, she delivered the final, devastating blow. We've invited Mark and Bella to come. They'll be taking the seats we had set aside for you. Mark, my ex-fiancé. The man I'd been with for 5 years before he left me for Bella, a vapid lifestyle influencer half his age. My mother had once called him a spineless parasite. Now he and his new girlfriend were being given my place at my family's table. My voice was a strangled whisper. You invited the man who shattered my heart and his girlfriend to the party I paid for instead of me? Mark is navigating a difficult career transition, she said, as if this were a logical explanation. And Bella is a breath of fresh air. They need our support. It's the compassionate thing to do. When I choked out a question about the $20,000, her response was breathtaking. As I said, we're grateful. We'll be sure to thank you in our toast. The money has been spent, after all. I hung up, my hand shaking. I immediately called my father, clinging to a desperate hope that he, the economics professor, the man of logic, would see the insanity. He answered, and I knew from his hesitant hello that he already knew. Dad, I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. Please tell me this isn't real. Tell me you won't let her do this. His reply was the same weak, hollow excuse I had heard my entire life. Your mother feels it's for the best, Kate. Let's not disrupt the equilibrium. We'll see you at Christmas. I could hear Camilla's voice in the background, sharp and clear. Richard, is that her? Tell her the matter is closed. Minutes later, a text from Sophie arrived. A photo of her and my mother clinking champagne glasses. The caption, finalizing the seating chart. It's all coming together. So excited. The casual cruelty was a physical blow. Dan's text came an hour later. Hey Kate. Heard about the party. Tough break. Mom can be a real CEO sometimes. Try not to let it get to you. Try not to let it get to you. As if I'd been disinvited from a casual lunch, not the culmination of a lifetime of trying, a project of love and hope that had been hijacked and given to the man who had wrecked my world. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, the lights of the Chicago skyline a cold, distant glitter, and felt the entire structure of my identity collapse. The weekend after the call was a flatline. I moved through my condo like a phantom, canceling meetings with a vague excuse of a migraine. The pain wasn't just about the party, it was the cumulative interest on a lifetime of being devalued. My mind replayed past slights like a hostile takeover bid, being left at the airport after a business trip in Asia because Sophie had a stressful week and my parents couldn't possibly leave her. The time my mother regifted a thoughtful, expensive watch I'd given her to a cousin right in front of me. The constant, casual dismissals of my career as something aggressive and unfeminine. On Monday, I sat across from my therapist, Dr. Evans, and laid out the facts in a numb, clinical monotone. She listened, her expression calm. When I finished, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered a diagnosis. Catherine, she said, her voice firm but gentle. Do you see the pattern? This isn't just poor communication. This is a system of emotional and financial exploitation. They have been treating you as a line of credit, not as a daughter. The word exploitation hit hard. They're my family, I whispered, the words a shield I'd held for decades. They just operate differently. They understand you perfectly, Dr. Evans corrected. They understand that you are capable, generous, and that you have a deep-seated need for their approval. And they have leveraged that understanding for their own benefit, repeatedly, without regard for your emotional well-being. That evening, my best friend, Olivia, arrived with a bottle of ridiculously expensive scotch. Her outrage was a cleansing fire. Are you kidding me? They cashed your check, used your project management skills, let you build this entire thing, and then kicked you out and gave your seat to your cheating ex and his child bride? Kate, this is not a family. This is a Ponzi scheme with your mother at the top. Her anger felt more validating than any apology. Later that night, in a moment of weakness, I checked social media. My mother had posted a photo of the gardens in Lenox. The caption read, "The stage is almost set. So much love and hard work has gone into planning this special celebration of 40 years. Feeling so blessed." In the comments, relatives gushed about her talent. My name, my $20,000, my very existence, had been completely erased from the prospectus. Worse, Sophie had posted a behind-the-scenes Instagram story. It showed her and Bella arranging some of the very lanterns I had sourced and paid for. Getting the vibe just right with this lovely lady. Sophie had written, tagging Bella. "So much fun planning with people who just get it." The calculated, public erasure was a new level of hostile action. It was designed to rewrite the record in real time, to position me as irrelevant. A familiar, insidious voice began in my head. Maybe they're right. Maybe you are too intense. Maybe you are difficult. The spiral of self-doubt was an old, familiar market crash. Part of me, the part conditioned for 38 years, just wanted to call and apologize for my own existence to be allowed back in. But another, newer part, a voice I barely recognized, whispered, "You have nothing to apologize for." By morning, the fog of grief was clearing, replaced by a cold, quiet clarity. The hurt was still there, a deep ache, but it was no longer a liability. It was becoming an asset. A week before the party, an email from my mother landed in my inbox. Subject: Final party expenses. My heart gave a stupid, hopeful lurch. Had they reconsidered? It was not an apology. It was a short, itemized list of last-minute costs they needed me to cover, a rush fee for extra stemware, a case of vintage port for my father's old professor, and an event insurance surcharge from the rental company. The email ended with a breathtakingly casual line. "Since you won't be using your flight, we told Sophie she could use the credit for a spa weekend after the party. I'm sure you don't mind." The sheer audacity asking for more money while giving away my assets was almost impressive. Later that day, Jenna, my caterer friend, called again, her voice strained. "Kate, you need to know. Your mother's assistant called. She wanted to confirm that we would have plenty of vegan and gluten-free options for Bella. She specifically said, and I quote, 'Bella is a guest of honor, so her needs are the top priority.'" Bella, the guest of honor. At the party I was funding. That evening, I saw it. The final, clarifying piece of data. Sophie posted a photo of the handwritten place cards, fanned out on their antique mahogany table. The calligraphy was beautiful. I know, because I had hired the calligrapher. And there, at the head table, next to my father, was a card that read Mark. Next to my mother, a card that read Bella. My name was nowhere. The caption, "It's all in the details." So excited to celebrate with our nearest and dearest. In that instant, something fundamental shifted. The hurt didn't vanish, but it was overshadowed by a powerful, crystalline resolve. The banker in me took over. I saw the flawed structure of my family with absolute clarity, saw the single asset me that had been propping up a failing institution for far too long. I had been their emergency fund, their risk mitigation, their bridge loan. And I realized, with a certainty that was both terrifying and liberating, that I could no longer underwrite the architecture of my own erasure. That night, Olivia came over. As I recounted the latest insults, the extra money, Bella as the guest of honor, the place cards, she just shook her head. "Kate," she said, her voice serious. "This isn't about them anymore. This is about you. What's your exit strategy?" The rage I felt then was a clean, pure energy. It was focused. It was quiet. And it was, I knew, my fiduciary duty to myself. I had spent a lifetime trying to earn a seat on their board. It was time to start my own firm. The next morning, I awoke not with a heavy heart, but with a clear head. The emotional storm had passed, leaving the solid ground of decision. The banker in me surveyed the situation, not as a wounded daughter, but as a crisis manager. First, a complete asset inventory. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet, listing every single vendor and service I had personally contracted and paid for: Union Square Provisions, Lakeshore Premier Events, the Burgundy Wine Distributor, the Floral Designer, the String Quartet, the Calligrapher, the Photographer. As I typed, a sense of power grew. Every contract, every invoice, every point of contact was in my name. The entire infrastructure of the event was my asset. Before I did anything, I called my friend David, a corporate lawyer. I laid out the facts. I entered into agreements for goods and services for an event, I explained. The hosts of the event, for whom I was arranging these services as a gift, have since formally disinvited me. Am I still obligated to deliver this gift? David's laugh was sharp. Let me get this straight. You're the bank and the event planner, and they fired you from the party? Kate, no. You are the client. The contracts are with you. You have every right to cancel or modify those services. Legally, it's a gift you are rescinding before delivery. You are 100% in the clear. His confirmation was the final piece of due diligence. I took a deep breath and began my work. My first call was to Jenna. Jenna, I said, my voice steady. I need to cancel the catering for the Monroe party. I quickly gave her the unvarnished truth. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a gasp. Oh, Kate, that is horrific. Of course. Consider it done. What should I tell them when they call me in a panic on Saturday? Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them the contract was with Catherine Monroe, and since she has canceled, the service is no longer being provided. I insisted she keep the substantial deposit for her trouble. One by one, I went down my list. I called the rental company, the florist, the wine distributor, the musicians. With each call, I was polite, professional, and clear. I explained that due to unforeseen circumstances, the event I had been planning was no longer proceeding under my management. Without exception, the vendors were understanding. Family, huh? The man from the rental company said. Say no more. With each cancellation email I sent, a palpable weight lifted. This was not an act of revenge. It was an act of asset reclamation. I was reclaiming my money, my time, my energy, and my dignity. Instead of wallowing, I began a new venture. I sent a text to a small group of my closest friends in Chicago. Slight change of plans for the Saturday, I wrote. I find myself unexpectedly free and in possession of a large quantity of non-refundable, very fine Burgundy. Hosting a founder's dinner at my place. Come as you are. Your presence is the only capital contribution required. The response was immediate. Olivia immediately volunteered to co-host. Others offered to bring appetizers and desserts. The most surprising response came from my father's younger sister, my Aunt Joan, who had always been a quiet observer of our family's market fluctuations. She had somehow heard about the situation. Kate, she texted. I heard what Camilla did. I am appalled, but not surprised. My husband and I would be honored to drive in from Evanston and join your founder's dinner, instead of that other event. As the day approached, a mix of emotions swirled within me, a deep satisfaction in my own agency, a flutter of anxiety about the inevitable market crash, and a lingering, tender sadness for the family I wished I had. I booked an extra session with Dr. Evans. What you are doing is not an act of aggression, Catherine, she affirmed. It is the creation of a boundary. A boundary is not a wall. It is a line that defines where you end and they begin, a line that protects your own home. You are simply refusing to let them hold their party in your living room after they've locked you out of the house. Her words resonated. I was no longer a victim of their toxic debt. I was the architect of my own solvency. Friday, the day before the party, arrived with a deceptive calm. I took the day off. I spent the morning at the gym and the afternoon tidying my condo, preparing for my own celebration. Around 4 p.m., the first tremor hit. A text from Jenna. FYI, your mother's assistant just called to confirm our arrival time tomorrow. I delivered the news as discussed. It was not well received. I believe the phrase breach of contract was used. I wished her the best of luck with her event. Throughout the evening, my mother sent texts about last-minute needs, asking me to order things for express delivery to Lenox. I read each one and set my phone aside. She was still operating under the assumption that I was her on-demand line of credit, oblivious that her entire event was a phantom asset. I silenced my phone and went to bed early, sleeping more soundly than I had in months. The hostile takeover was complete. The liquidation was scheduled for dawn. Saturday, the day of the now non-existent party, dawned bright and clear over Lake Michigan. I woke to a phone that had imploded. 37 missed calls, 82 text messages, 21 voicemails. I made coffee, sat on my balcony overlooking the city, and began to listen. The first voicemail, from my mother at 7:15 a.m., was sharp with confusion. "Catherine, the caterer seems to have made a grave error. Call me immediately." By 9:30 a.m., the family group chat, which I was still silently observing, had become a real-time log of the collapse. Relatives arriving from out of state were texting photos of a perfectly manicured but empty lawn. "Where are the tents?" my uncle posted. "Did we get the time wrong?" Sophie added, "Mom, the florist just called and said the order was canceled. What is happening?" My father called at 11 a.m., his voice a tight coil of panic and rage. "Catherine, what have you done? There are 60 people here. There is no food, no tables, no music. You have to fix this." I took a sip of my coffee. "Done, Dad," I replied, my voice calm. "I haven't done anything." I respected Mom's wishes. I was disinvited, remember? She said she would toast to me from a distance. "I'm just providing the distance." There was a sputtering silence. "This is bigger than just you and your mother," he finally managed. "You've humiliated this family." "That's interesting," I said softly. "That's exactly how I felt when I learned my seat was given to the man who betrayed me." My mother's voicemail, left moments later, was a masterclass in shrieking hysteria. "How could you be so vindictive? You have ruined our most special day. I always knew you were a cold, transactional creature, but this is monstrous. You are no longer my daughter." Sophie's texts were a rapid-fire assault, accusing me of being a jealous, bitter narcissist. Dan's was more nuanced. "Whoa, Kate, this is nuclear. But I can't say I blame you. The stuff Mom was saying about you is messed up." By early afternoon, the reports filtering in from Aunt Joan, who was getting texts from my other cousins, painted a vivid picture. Camilla had locked herself in her bedroom. Richard was frantically calling every restaurant in a 50-mile radius, trying to find a table for 60 on a Saturday night. Several guests, including my parents' oldest friends, had simply gotten in their cars and left. Meanwhile, in my sun-drenched Chicago condo, my own party was coming to life. Olivia arrived with a huge cheese board and her portable speaker. Aunt Joan and her husband brought 2 homemade pies. Friends trickled in, filling my home with warm chatter and easy laughter. We sat on my sofa and dining chairs, ate from a potluck buffet spread across my kitchen island, and raised glasses of the excellent Burgundy that was meant for another celebration. Surrounded by my chosen board of directors, I felt a pang of grief for the family I was born into, for the returns I had tried so hard to generate. But that grief was enveloped by a much larger, more powerful feeling, the quiet, profound peace of finally, truly, being solvent. The buzzing of my phone eventually stopped. And in the silence, I felt a lightness I hadn't realized was possible. I was free. The weeks following what my friends dubbed the Great Correction were a slow, complex unwinding. The initial fallout was a storm of accusations. My mother, true to form, attempted a PR blitz, telling relatives I'd had a severe nervous breakdown and had sabotaged the party in a fit of pique. My sister, Sophie, became her loyal press secretary, embellishing the story with details of my supposed instability and bitterness. But a funny thing happened. The narrative didn't hold. Too many people had seen the lead-up. Aunt Joan gently corrected the story with anyone who would listen. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, not with condemnation, but with quiet understanding. Your mother tried to pull something similar at my graduation, one wrote. I wish I'd had your nerve. It turned out the manipulative enterprise my mother had built was a house of cards. My mother eventually sent a long, rambling email. It was a masterclass in writing down a loss without admitting fault, filled with phrases like, I'm sorry you felt the need to react that way, and it's a shame this entire affair was so mismanaged. It was an offer to return to the old status quo, a test to see if I would accept the blame to restore a toxic peace. I archived it without a reply. When my birthday rolled around in November, the customary card from my parents didn't arrive. Instead, I spent the weekend hiking with Olivia and 2 other friends. The crisp autumn air felt more real, more celebratory than any forced family gathering ever had. About 3 months after the party, my father called. He was in Chicago for a conference and asked if I would have dinner with him. I agreed, cautiously. At a quiet restaurant in my neighborhood, he looked older, tired. I failed you, Kate, he said, staring into his drink. I spent our whole marriage letting your mother manage the emotional portfolio because it was easier. I let her use you as a hedge against every problem. I see that now. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth. And I am deeply sorry. It wasn't a solution, but it was an honest accounting, a crack of light. Dan reached out too. He sent me a script for a short film he'd written. It was surprisingly good, and it was about 2 sisters, one who built skyscrapers of glass and steel, and one who built castles in the air. It was the most honest thing he had ever given me. 6 months after the party, my father proposed family counseling. To my shock, my mother agreed. We had 3 sessions. Camilla was defensive, Sophie was tearfully accusatory, and I was calm. The therapist gently pointed out the established patterns, the scapegoating, the triangulation, the transactional nature of their affection. While it led to no miraculous merger, the experience was profoundly validating. Hearing a neutral expert name the dynamics I had felt my whole life solidified my position. I hadn't been irrational. I had been a performing asset in a deeply dysfunctional market. My own healing was a quiet, steady process of rebuilding my personal portfolio. With Dr. Evans, I learned to identify the people-pleasing habits that had been programmed into me. I practiced saying no. I invested my time and energy in friendships that were reciprocal, in relationships built on the solid foundation of mutual respect. I learned to separate their valuation of me from my own net worth. Their inability to see me was a reflection of their own limitations, not a measure of my value. I was not a problem to be solved. I was simply a person they did not know how to love. A year to the day after the canceled party, I hosted another dinner. My Founders Club was there, Olivia, and Joan and her husband, other friends who had become my bedrock. Dan came, looking healthier than I'd seen him in years. Even my father drove in from Evanston alone. My condo was filled with warmth and the easy, unforced sound of genuine laughter. As I looked around the table at the faces of the people who saw me, who cherished me for who I was, not for what I could provide, I felt a profound sense of peace. Someone asked if I regretted my hostile takeover. I thought for a moment, swirling the burgundy in my glass, the same vintage from the year before. I regret that it took me 38 years to learn that my value isn't determined by a seat on someone else's board, I said. But I don't regret finally choosing to build my own firm. Sometimes, the most prudent investment is to divest from a failing entity, no matter how long you've been a shareholder. My relationship with my family is now a different entity altogether. It's a restructured company, smaller, more honest, with clear governance. My father and I are slowly, carefully rebuilding. My brother and I are finding our way as peers. My mother and sister remain distant, living in the world they constructed. I hold no animosity towards them anymore, only a quiet sadness for the lost potential. I learned that true belonging isn't something you can acquire. It's what happens when you are valued for your presence, not your purpose. And I learned that the most important asset you can ever have is self-respect. It's the only one that is truly recession-proof.